So, good morning, ma'am. Good morning, classmates. We are the Group 2, and now we are going to present the brief summary entitled The First Voyage Around the World. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, first, I will give a short details or a short biography about the authors. Ferdinand Magellan was born on February 3, 1480 and died on April 25, 1521. He is a Portuguese explorer who led the Spanish expeditions to the East Indies from 1519 to 1522 in search of a western route to the Malacca Islands, the Spice Islands, resulting in the first circumnavigation of the earth, completed by the Juan Sebastian Elcano. Antonio Pigafetta was born on 1491-1531, Italian scholar and explorer from the Republic of Venice. He traveled with the Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan and his crew on their voyage around the world by order of King Charles I of Spain. His work became a classic, and prominent Western literary figures such as William Shakespeare, Michael de Montaigne, and Giambattista Vico referred to it in their interpretations of the New World. His travelogue is an important primary source for the study of pre-colonial Philippines. His account was also a major reference to the events leading up the Magellan's arrival in the Philippines. His encounters with a local leaders, his death at the hands of Lapu-Lapu's forces in the Battle of Mactan, and his deportation from the Philippines. The historical context. The first voyage around the world by Magellan, the document reveals several insights not only into the character of the Philippines during the pre-colonial period, but also into how Europeans with fresh eyes view a deeply unfamiliar terrain, environment, people, and culture. Released after Pigafetta's return to Italy, Antonio Pigafetta wrote about his first-hand observations and overall expressions of the Far East, including their experiences in the Visayas. According to the Pigafetta's account, their fleet arrived at the Ladrones Islands, also known as the Islands of the Thieves. These people have no arms but use sticks with a fishbone at the end. They are poor but clever thieves, and they named these three islands the Ladrones Islands in honor of them. The Islands of Ladronas. The Marianas Islands are currently located southeast of Japan, southwest of Hawaii, north of New Guinea, and east of Philippines. March 16, 1521, Pigafetta reported that they had arrived at the islands of Zamal, now known as Samar, but Magellan decided to land on another uninhabited islands for greater security and to the rest for a few days. After 2 days, on March 18, 9 men came to them and welcomed them with food, drinks, and gifts, expressing their joy and eagerness to see them. The natives gave them fish, palm, wine or uraka, figs, 2 cocos, rice, and cocos. Pigafetta describes what appeared to be a coconut. These palms produces a fruit named cocho, which is as large as the head, or thereabouts. Its first husk is green, and its second husk is yellow, and 2 fingers in thickness, in which they find certain threads with which they make the cords used to fasten their boats. There is another layer beneath the shells that is much harder and thicker than a thick. They burned the second rind and made a powder out of it that they could use. Under this rind is a white marrow about the thickness of a finger, which they eat fresh with meat and fish, as we do bread, and it has an almond flavor, and if dried, it could be used to make bread.
Today I will discuss about the 5 ships. First on the list is the Santiago, has 32 crew under the command of Juan Serrano, smallest among the 5 ships, called as a caravel and the first ship that has been lost. second one has called San Antonio, has 60 crew under the command of Juan de Cartagena, soon led by Alvarado de Mesquita, the largest in the fleet and the second ship that has been lost. One was called Concepcion, has 43 crew under the command of Gaspar de Queseda. Captain was executed because of munity burned, and the third ship that has been lost. One was called Trinidad, has 55 crew under the command of Ferdinand Magellan. The flagship was attacked by the Portuguese ship, was left shipwrecked, and the fourth ship that has been lost. Lastly, and the fifth one was called Victoria, has 43 crew under the command of Luis Mendoza, and soon led by Juan Sebastian Elcano. Antonio Pifaguetas on board, the first circumnavigative in the world and the only ship that has completed the voyage. Additional information: did you know out of 5 ships, only 3 has been reached in the Philippines? After the Battle of Mactan, their man is enough to man to 2 ships, which is the Trinidad and Victoria. Until they returned to Spain, only the ship survived, which is the Victoria, and one of the survivor was Antonio Pifagueta, which kept the journal about their expedition. Another additional info that Pifagueta heard of Magellan's planned expedition and decided to join, accepting the little of supremacy that exceeds of the number and the modest of salary of 1,000 Maldives. During the voyage, which started in August 1519, Pifagueta collected expensive data concerning the geographic climate, the flora and the fauna, and the native inhabitants of the place that has been expedition and visited. Invitations of places that expedition visited is meticulously notes provide individual and future explorers and cartographers, mainly due to his inclusions of nautical and linguistic data, and also the latter-day historians because of its vivid detail and style. The only other sailor that maintained the journal during the voyage is Francisco Albo, Victoria's last pilot, who's kept the formal of the logbook.
Good day, ma'am. I am Nizel Macion from BSED English 1A, and I'm here to discuss my topic about analysis of Pigafetta's Chronicle. One of the most frequently cited documents by historians researching the pro-colonial Philippines. This is one of the earliest written accounts. Pigafetta was regarded as a credible source for a previously unchronicled and undocumented period. The most detailed documentation, it was thought that Pigafetta's writing represented the purest pre-colonial society. Pigafetta's work is extremely valuable in the study and writing of Philippine history. We must recognize the author's biases as well as his identity, loyalties, and the circumstances in which he found himself and how they influenced the text that he produced. We must understand that he was a chronicler appointed by the King of Spain to accompany and document a voyage aimed at expanding the Spanish Empire. A person of noble descent came from a wealthy Italian family. These characteristics influenced his narrative. The details he chose to include the text, his characterization of the people and species he encountered, and his interpretation and retelling of the events. As a cartographer and geographer, Pigafetta was able to provide information on the geography and climate of the location visited during their voyage. Pigafetta's description to the people was from a 16th century European perspective. Pigafetta was indigenous belief systems and ways of life as interior to Christianity and Europeans. He is always commenting on the nakedness of the natives or how fascinated he is by their exotic culture. He emphasized the natives' awe and literacy in the face of European artillery, merchandise, as well as other goods. He repeatedly mentioned the abundance of species such as ginger, as well as precious metals such as gold. When they saw the natives' indigenous attire, Pigafetta thought they were naked because they were wearing fewer clothes than the Europeans. Pigafetta's vision was too limited to recognize that such clothing was only appropriate for the tropical climate of the materials used by the natives for their houses, such as palm and bamboo, which allow more air to enter the house and compensate for the hot climate in the island. We must recognize that such observations are rooted in the context of Pigafetta's
The importance history of Ferdinand Magellan. The Magellan route is the perfect example of an exploratory trip as it winded the vision of the world from the 15th to 18th centuries, particularly due to the discovery of the Magellan Strait and the Pacific Ocean. From that moment, a spherical world was shown and sailed for the first time. This fact amplified and diversified all routes previously established among Europe, America, and Asia. The Magellan route was a master key line in communications. It opened doors into places where they passed, where people, ideas, and goods were coming and going. It established commercial contacts between East and West that remained for centuries. Also, it promoted the exchange of multiple sorts of experiences, scientific, cultural, religious. Huge areas of America and Asia were known and visited afterwards by Europeans, thanks to the map made during this voyage. Those maps were not only geographical ones, but also cultural and linguistic, in some anthropological. The importance of history of Antonio Pigafetta. The relevance of his own venture fundamentally lies in the fact that he took part to the first globe circumnavigation between 1519 and 1522, and he was able to accomplish it after the murder of Ferdinand Magellan, leaving a detailed description of the journey in the report of the first trip around the world, a lost manuscript that was rescued later in 1797 and today is considered one of the most important documentary evidence relating to the geographical discoveries of the 16th century. Antonio Pigafetta, fascinating and fleeing personality, for scholar, he still represents a partial mystery. About him, too little is known to define a satisfactory profile on the biographical side. Documents and the testimony of the contemporaneous are scarce, and his own character primarily appears from what he wrote in his report. His own narration about the First World Circumnavigation was one of the greatest achievements in the history of Navy exploration and discovery. In this narration can be found descriptions of peoples, countries, goods, and even the language that were spoken, of which this seafarer was trying to assemble some of brief glossaries.
Hi, so for this video, I am going to discuss about the contribution and relevance of the first voyage around the world in the understanding narrative of Philippine history. Magellan was credited with leading the first expedition that proved that the world is round by sailing from east to west. After him, 5 more Spanish expeditions followed in between year 1525 and 1542, starting the Spain colonization of the Philippines in the next 3 countries. And because of that, it opened doors in the places where they passed, where people, ideas, and goods were coming and going. It established commercial contacts between East and West that remained for centuries. Also, it promoted the exchange of multiple sorts of experience. For example, scientific, cultural, religion, and their traditions.